Do you really know where your food comes from?
Our food system has changed drastically in the last 100 years and continues to change very rapidly. Modern technology has pushed the limits of how food is grown, processed, distributed, and consumed. One of the biggest advances in technology is also one of the most controversial, and that is the use of genetic engineering technologies to create modified food products.
Many people don't realize just how much of their food is made from GMOs, the shorthand term for genetically modified organisms. Genetically modified organisms are plants or animals that have been created using biotechnology, also known as genetic engineering or GE, to produce DNA combinations that do not occur in nature.
Many people confuse genetic engineering of plants with hybridization, which has been used for centuries. Hybrids are created by cross-pollinating two closely related species. This is a natural, low-technology process. Examples include broccolini, tangelos, grapples, boysenberries, rutabaga, and many varieties of tomatoes and corn. The process of genetic modification is not naturally occurring. It is done in a lab on a molecular level. There are many reasons as to why items are modified. In 1991, the California company Calgene submitted application to the FDA to produce a tomato named the Flavor Saver. This tomato was engineered using biotechnology to ripen slower than conventional tomatoes. Calgene received approval to produce the tomato in 1992, and in 1994, the FDA declared the Flavor Saver to be as safe as conventional tomatoes. By the end of 1995, 35 different applications around the world were approved to grow 9 transgenic crops for commercial purposes. 20 of those applications were in the United States. These applications were not only for delayed ripening tomatoes, but also for versions of canola, cotton, corn, potatoes, soybeans, and squash.
Today it is estimated that 170 million acres of genetically modified crops are planted in the United States each year. This includes 90% of the U.S. canola crop, 88% of the U.S. corn crop, 90% of the U.S. cotton crop, 94% of the U.S. soybean crop, 95% of U.S. sugar beet crop, the majority of papaya grown in Hawaii, and an increasing number of zucchini and yellow summer squash crops. Interestingly, though, the tomato was the first commercially produced GE crop. There are currently no GE tomatoes on the market as the Flavor Saver stopped production in 1997. Crops like corn and soybeans are used to make animal feed, meaning that many animal products such as milk, meat, eggs, and honey contain genetically modified organisms. GMOs are also found in many processed foods as many ingredients are derived from high-risk crops, such as amino acids, aspartame, ascorbic acid, sodium ascorbate, vitamin C, citric acid, sodium citrate, ethanol, natural and artificial flavorings, high fructose corn syrup, hydrolyzed vegetable protein, lactic acids, maltodextrins, molasses, MSG, sucrose, TVP, xanthan gum, vitamins, and yeast products. According to the Grocery Manufacturers Association, 70% of items in American grocery stores contain genetically modified organisms.
The position of the United States Food and Drug Administration is that these products are considered to be the same as their traditional counterparts, and on its website, the FDA says that it has set up a voluntary consultation process with biotechnology companies to ensure safety of their food products. The Food and Drug Administration says that they encourage developers of genetically engineered plants to consult with the FDA before marketing their products, but no consultation or evaluation is required. They also state that they consider a consultation to be complete when they are satisfied with the developer's safety assessment.
How do you know if you are eating food with these ingredients? Well, in the United States, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to know. The United States has no law regarding the labeling of these products. More than 60 other countries do, including Australia, New Zealand, Japan, China, Saudi Arabia, South Korea, Thailand, Indonesia, Brazil, Venezuela, Taiwan, Russia, India, Chile, South Africa, and the entire European Union.
With the absence of a federal law in the United States, many initiatives have sought to implement mandatory labeling on a state level. The first major attempt came in Oregon in 2002. Oregon ballot measure 27 enjoyed widespread support leading up to the election, only to lose after opponents spent $5.5 million to defeat it, a spending record at that time. The most recent and perhaps most well-known initiative to reach voters was California Proposition 37 in 2012. Much like the Oregon measure a decade earlier, it enjoyed widespread support early, only to be defeated.
The total amount spent by the opposition to Proposition 37 was about $46 million. Donors included many large food companies as well as biotech companies like Dow, DuPont, and the number one donor, Monsanto, who donated more than $8 million to defeat this measure. Monsanto is the leading producer of genetically engineered seed and describes itself as a sustainable agriculture company with more than 400 facilities in 66 countries and more than 20,000 employees. They develop genetically modified seeds and place patents on them before selling them to farmers with promises of increased crop yields, herbicide tolerance, decreased labor needs, and drought tolerance. Farmers are prohibited from saving seeds, as was common in the past with traditional seeds, or they can face very expensive lawsuits. Even farmers who do not do business with Monsanto can face penalties if it is found that their crops contain any trace of the patented seeds. On their website, Monsanto states that their opposition to mandatory labeling laws is due to the absence of any demonstrated risks, and that labeling could imply that food products containing these ingredients are somehow inferior to their conventional or organic counterparts. Why, if so many other countries require labeling, does the United States government take the position that there is no need to distinguish genetically engineered products for the consumer? Could it be because our government is full of Monsanto's people? Monsanto actually has a full page on their website devoted to the question, does Monsanto have undue influence on governments? Just a few of the government officials who have had ties to Monsanto include Clarence Thomas, who served as a lawyer for Monsanto in the 1970s, Ann Veneman, who served on the board of directors for Monsanto's Calgene Company, Donald Rumsfeld, who served on the board of directors for Monsanto's Searle Pharmaceuticals, Islam Siddiqui, who worked as a lobbyist for CropLife International, representing Dow, DuPont, and Monsanto. Prior to his lobbyist work, he worked in the Clinton administration USDA, advocating against labeling efforts. Roger Beachy, the founding president of the Monsanto-funded Danforth Plant Science Center, Linda Fisher, a Monsanto vice president, and Michael Taylor, Monsanto's former vice president of public policy. Lawmakers who own stock in Monsanto include Senator Kay Hagan and Representatives Dave Camp, Joe Kennedy, Alan Lowenthal, Michael McCall, Jim Renacci, Jim Sensenbrenner, and Fred Upton. In 2008, Monsanto spent $8.8 million on lobbying. In 2012, they spent nearly $6 million on lobbying and contributed more than $500,000 to federal candidates, with more than $10,000 given to 9 different representatives and 4 different senators. In March of 2013, Monsanto's reach went a step further with a piece of legislation buried within House Resolution 933, the Consolidated and Further Continuing Appropriations Act of 2013. The purpose of the bill as a whole was to avoid a government shutdown, but Section 735 also served to grant biotechnology companies like Monsanto temporary immunity from any legal challenges to the safety of its seeds. Senator Roy Blunt, a Republican from Missouri, worked directly with Monsanto to write what is officially known as the Farmer Assurance Provision. Blunt has received over $95,000 in campaign donations from Monsanto and its affiliates since his election in 1996.
Even with multiple failed campaigns in the United States, labeling still has widespread public support. In September of 2011, the National Just Label It campaign submitted a petition to the United States Food and Drug Administration calling for mandatory labeling of genetically engineered foods. 6 months later, in March of 2012, that petition had gained the signatures of 1 million Americans.
Just Label It cites many polls and surveys on their website by various groups, with all of them showing that the overwhelming majority of Americans support mandatory labeling. Very few issues receive this level of support.
There are still numerous efforts underway in the United States to mandate labeling of these products. Many of the efforts are appealing to state legislatures, and if successful, would only require the labels to appear in that particular state. Each state has its own rules on how citizens can place new legislation on a popular ballot, with some allowing citizens to draft a proposal, gain signatures and support, and put it directly to a vote. These states, which include California and Oregon, have been the ones to come the closest to making labeling a reality. Many other states, including Pennsylvania, only allow legislatively referred amendments to go to a vote, meaning the citizens have to appeal to their lawmakers.
One state initiative that is gaining traction and will likely go to a vote in 2013 is the one in Washington State. I-522 gained more than 350,000 signatures on its way to the ballot. Washington has also seen local initiatives passed, like the one in San Juan County, which is made up of island communities in the northwest part of the state. This provision bans the growth of GMO crops in that county. In conjunction with I-522, there is also a proposal called House Bill 1407 by Washington Republican State Representative Carrie Condata that would allow local authorities to regulate GMOs as necessary without action from the state. Many other states currently have proposed bills in the works that would mandate labeling. These include Alaska, Connecticut, Florida, Hawaii, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Missouri, New Hampshire, New Jersey, North Carolina, Oregon, Rhode Island, Tennessee, Vermont, and Virginia, and Pennsylvania with SB 653, introduced by Senator Dalen Leach in Harrisburg on March 12, 2013. SB 653 is backed by 12 co-sponsors. Upon announcement, Senator Leach said, "I've introduced this bill not to ban genetically engineered foods, but to allow consumers to choose which items they purchase. I am concerned about the lack of information available about the presence of genetically engineered food, and I believe it is every consumer's right to know what ingredients are found in the products they buy." A federal bill sponsored by Representative Jared Polis of Colorado was introduced on February 20, 2013. If this bill is successful, it would set a national mandate for the definition and identification of genetically engineered ingredients in food products.
None of these attempts have succeeded yet. Their presence is beginning to concern food producers. In January of 2013, it was reported by multiple Washington, D.C. sources that the nation's largest food corporations had sent representatives to meet with the FDA to discuss the idea of mandatory labeling of their GMO-sourced products. Why would they suddenly be interested in labeling? Well, the California No on 37 campaign, though successful in stopping labeling, was very expensive for all the companies that donated to it. With so many states launching similar initiatives, food companies are looking at a long and expensive road if they want to avoid labeling.
Many recognizable corporate food producers donated to the No on 37 campaign in California. These are just some of the largest donators, with PepsiCo and the Grocery Manufacturers Association donating over $2 million. Kraft Foods, Coca-Cola, Nestle, ConAgra, and General Mills donating over $1 million. Kellogg's, Smithfield, Del Monte, Campbell's, and Heinz all donating over $500,000, and the rest donating over $100,000. Multiply these by 49 other states and any federal bills, and these companies would not need to worry about labeling because they wouldn't be in business.
For this reason, it was no surprise when rumors surfaced in early 2013 that many large food companies were meeting with the FDA to discuss a labeling law. On the surface, it may look like a good thing. When you consider it further, though, these companies may not have the purest of intentions. For instance, there are many major food companies that fight labeling, but also own organic brands that labeling proponents have relied on to avoid GMOs. These brands have become known as trader companies by those in the labeling movement and include
Naked Juice, Tostitos Organic, and Tropicana Organic, owned by PepsiCo, Boca Burgers and Back to Nature, owned by Kraft, Honesty and Odwalla, owned by Coca-Cola, Orville Redenbacher Organics, Hunt's Organic, and Light Life, owned by ConAgra, Muir Glen, Cascadian Farm, and Larabar, owned by General Mills, Kashi, Bear Naked, and Morningstar Farms, owned by Kellogg's, Horizon, Silk, and White Wave, owned by Dean Foods, R.W. Knudsen and Santa Cruz Organic, owned by Smuckers, and O Organics, owned by Safeway.
Many organic consumers have now boycotted these brands due to the money their parent companies use to fight labeling. The backlash could be enough to have these companies thinking twice about labeling. But there is another more likely reason for these meetings. The grassroots movements forming in the individual states are resulting in proposed legislation built by the anti-GMO consumers and legislators, not the food and biotech industries. Perhaps the food companies are trying to strike first with a less strict federal labeling law, more to their liking, both in an attempt to benefit their bottom line and boost public image.
Even Monsanto actually supported labeling in Europe in 1998 and 1999, running ads showing their support to consumers, after labeling was already in place.
Biotech companies promote genetically engineered seeds to have various benefits over traditional seeds. A visit to the Monsanto website provides a product list with many different patented traits for farmers to choose from. The benefits described by biotech companies include
pest resistance. Insects have the ability to destroy valuable crops, which has led biotechnology companies to develop crops that actually have the ability to defend themselves from pests. By inserting a gene known as Bt, commonly found in soil, scientists were able to create a plant that is toxic to pests such as corn borers, budworms, bollworms, and beetles. While companies like Monsanto tell farmers that this technology will allow them to apply less pesticide to crops, there is concern about insects becoming resistant to Bt, which would require additional pesticides to be applied anyway. The EPA recognizes this possibility on their website and lists additional provisions to the approval of Bt products. According to a recent study by Charles Benbrook of the Center for Sustaining Agriculture and Natural Resources at Washington State University, insecticide use did drop 28% between 1996 and 2011, but is now again on the rise. Herbicide tolerance. Weed growth around crops can force the plants to compete for nutrients. Genetic engineering has allowed for crops that are resistant to compounds that kill weeds. This technology was introduced by Monsanto in 1996 under the title Roundup Ready in crops such as soybeans, corn, and cotton. Roundup is Monsanto's name for the herbicide glyphosate, and Roundup Ready crops are genetically engineered to endure application of glyphosate. Similarly to Bt crops, though, there are increased reports of weed species becoming resistant to these herbicides. This evolution of resistant weeds has led to the farmer's need to apply additional herbicidal products, according to the same study by Benbrook. The study shows that 1.5 million pounds of herbicide were applied to genetically modified crops in 1999, but has increased to about 90 million pounds in 2011. Monsanto has multiple pages on its website dedicated to herbicide-resistant weeds, with instructions on how farmers are to deal with them, including the application of additional herbicide. Cold tolerance. In an attempt to make crops more resistant to colder temperatures, biotechnology companies have attempted to place genes from cold water fish like winter flounder into crops such as tomatoes. However, there are no genetically engineered tomatoes currently available to consumers. Drought tolerance. Launched in 2013, Monsanto touts their Genuity Drought Guard hybrid corn, otherwise known as MON 87460, as the agriculture industry's first biotech drought solution. Many types of plants have been made drought-resistant through traditional non-GM plant breeding, but the full deregulation of this trait by the FDA in December of 2011 marks the beginning of traits being introduced with several genes involved. The USDA, in its final environmental assessment of the product, stated that minimum moisture requirements are similar between MON 87460 and conventional corn, and therefore MON 87460 is not anticipated to expand corn acreage into areas not currently used for corn production. Increased nutrition. Genetic modification has allowed for changes to the nutritional content of food. An example of this is so-called golden rice, which has been modified to produce beta-carotene, the source of vitamin A. Many people in developing nations don't get enough of this nutrient, so golden rice is a product that many proponents of GMOs refer to when listing the benefits of this technology. As golden rice moves closer to becoming widely accepted in these areas, it remains unknown as to how it will be accepted. Another example of genetic engineering for nutritional purposes are Monsanto's Vistiv soybeans, which are said to produce soybean oils with higher monounsaturated fat levels and lower saturated and polyunsaturated fat levels than traditional soybeans. Disease resistance. This type of genetically engineered crop is much less common than the pest and herbicide resistant type. There are 3 crops genetically engineered to be disease resistant that are commercially available. These include zucchini, crookneck squash, and Hawaiian-grown papaya.
There remains much debate about the benefits of genetically engineered crops versus the risks, both short-term and long-term. It is a very complex debate that is not likely to yield much in the way of clear-cut answers. The majority of those involved in this issue waste little time on the idea that GMOs will be eradicated in the food supply anytime soon. Most simply feel that these products should be identified so that the consumer can make that choice. Some might still choose to consume these products after labeling, and some may not.
The argument made by the opposition to labeling is that labeling is unnecessary and the cost of new packaging and more expensive ingredients would raise prices for consumers. In 2001, several years after the European Union had adopted mandatory labeling, David Byrne, the European Commissioner for Public Health and Consumer Protection, said that labeling did not result in increased costs despite the horrifying double-digit prediction of some interests. Despite this fact, many of the California voters who cast a no vote on Proposition 37 did so thinking that food costs would increase if labeling were implemented. At this time, the FDA is in the process of approving salmon that is genetically engineered by the company Aqua Bounty to grow faster than natural salmon. Under FDA regulations, genetically modified salmon would be classified as a veterinary drug. Considering that the FDA has yet to reject any application it has received regarding genetically engineered food, opponents of these modified fish are already making preparations. Alaska has already passed a resolution asking the FDA to further examine the effects of producing the salmon, as well as asking the government to require its labeling. Many grocery chains have also already announced that they will not sell genetically modified salmon, including Whole Foods and Trader Joe's. The FDA is accepting public comments regarding genetically modified salmon until April 26, 2013. Whole Foods also announced that they will require all of the products containing genetically modified organisms sold in their stores to be labeled by the year 2018. Trader Joe's claims that the products bearing their name already come from non-GMO sources.
Unless the people of the United States stand up and demand to know what is in the products they purchase and consume, this country will remain in the dark when it comes to genetically engineered food. If you do wish to avoid GMO products in the United States, here are some tips to follow.
Know which products are most likely to be genetically modified. The big five are corn, soy, canola, cotton, and sugar made from beets. Buy organic. Look for the USDA certified organic seal when purchasing high-risk items or processed foods. National organic standards prohibit the use of genetic engineering in those products. Simply choosing organic products, however, is not considered to be a suitable long-term alternative to product labeling, as cross-pollination of GMO crops can contaminate plants other than the original crop. Grow or buy fresh foods to eat rather than processed. This way you know there are no hidden ingredients made from the GMO crops. Do your research and keep informed. The United States Department of Agriculture's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service maintains a list of all pending petitions regarding biotechnology deregulation. The list includes the petition for download and allows consumers to submit comments regarding the petitions. Currently, this list includes a non-browning apple and freeze-tolerant eucalyptus, in addition to crops already available. Utilize the Non-GMO Project. This nonprofit identifies itself as the only third-party verification and labeling for non-GMO food and products. The comprehensive website includes a massive list of non-GMO verified products sorted by category and brand and searchable by name. There are also lists of participating retailers and verified restaurants and an iPhone app shopping guide. And finally, when in doubt about a favorite product, contact the manufacturer and ask directly.
Finally, if you choose to avoid GMO products and wish to join in the effort for mandatory labeling in the United States, here are some ways to get involved.
Visit justlabelIt.org and learn about the national campaign. You can add your name and comments to the petition already signed by 1.2 million Americans. Get involved with your state's Right to Know campaign at righttoknowgmo.org. If your state is not one of the 37 with an existing campaign, then start one. Contact your lawmakers and let them know that this is an important issue that deserves action. Share information with your family and friends who might not be aware about genetically modified food. And finally, vote with your dollars and buy non-GMO whenever possible.
The campaign for GMO labeling is picking up speed in 2013 as consumers educate themselves and realize the power that they have over these huge companies. By staying informed, getting involved, and voting with your dollars, it is only a matter of time before companies realize we do have a right to know.